I'm talking with Kumo this morning, and I'm sharing with him that perhaps we've been too practical as of late. Too many crossovers, too many SUVs, and sure enough, we looked over the episode history, and that was indeed the case. So then we're looking over an email we get from our friends in Munich, and they say, hey, why don't you come out to Atlanta and be one of the first people to drive our new X5, and if you make the trip, we'll let you take our really fancy X5 off-road. That's a hard invite to turn down. But then it dawned on me that I always felt the X5 kind of lived in the shadow of the Cayenne, because as much as I am not a practical human being and not a huge fan of crossovers and SUVs, the Cayenne is something special because it defies physics. I've told you this in many episodes. Maybe my expectations of the Cayenne are too high and my expectations of the X5 are too low. Only way to really find out is take advantage of their very kind offer, get on the plane and go to Atlanta. I feel like you and I have been here before. We've driven this engine before. Oh wait, we have. We've driven it twice before. Just recently in an X4 and then, oh Santa Maria Madre de Dios, that 540 sedan. So here we're strapping a lot more weight to it. This is what we talked about, 4,800 pounds in the tech review. So let's put our foot into it on some lovely back roads north of Atlanta and see how she goes. It's got plenty of power, to the point where would I say no to the 8-cylinder? Probably not. Me, I'd get the 8-cylinder, but wow, this thing, like the volume car is gonna be this engine, and it's too much fun for the yummy mommies or the baby buggy that this thing is gonna be. You're gonna see it in those like school lines, you're gonna see it at Starbucks, and it's almost like every one of those women or some dudes are gonna have a knowing smile, because this is a collaborative effort, this drive review. You just don't know that. I'm doing this in conjunction with Kelley Blue Book and their crack editor, the Giraffe, otherwise known as Matt Deegan. He's sitting in the back right now. He drove the car before me and classified this engine as a honey of an engine. Now, I'd like you guys to vote in the comments below. If I were to describe any car, any part of a car as a honey of an engine, do I sound like A, a human being with any intelligence, B, the editor of Kelley Blue Book, or C, a used car salesman? You and I need to clarify a couple of things about suspension setups. You see, I had one idea in my mind about this whole off-road package, but then I had dinner with the guy who runs all of suspension for the X5, and apparently I was way wrong. You see, there is that setup that is the basic setup I told you about in the tech review. I'm not going to rehash it here. But then there's an air ride setup. Can be had as like a standalone option, or one can have the off-road package like the car we're driving today. And that is the air ride. Then there's like a brush guard underneath the vehicle. There's some tuning to the suspension as well as the transmission that's changed. So there's basically another setting on the transmission. And then there's this flash camera system in it. You know, like in the Range Rover where it has the low-speed camera going forward. That is the case here, so you can use it during off-road. Makes sense. But then there's electric stabilizer bars that are on offer. Basically stabilizer bars that have an electric motor that can adjust how much effect they have on a tall 4,800-pound vehicle like this. Apparently, one cannot have both together. It is either the off-road package or this like M package that has the electric stabilizer bars, but not both. Verstehen Sie das? So I got an unusual surprise here, a really crappy road. Like whatever the road surface here, it's designed for diesel pickup trucks, not an X5. So this is a great opportunity to do some driving dynamics. Let's put our foot into it. Going up a hill, little elevation change, turn, comfort mode. You notice there's a little bit of squat in the back when you push it hard in comfort mode. Let's try it around this turn here. Please don't try this at home. And confident. Okay, now the pavement is getting better, but the turns are going to get more aggressive. So let's go into sport mode, put our foot into it. And hang on for dear life, 4,800 pounds, declining radius turn with an elevation change, and quite a guardrail there. Impressive. More so than a baby buggy should be. But then again, Frodam Faden, that's kind of the answer here. On not so aggressive roads, it translates to a lot more road composure. And it's not just the suspension, it's a combination of things. It's the air ride in this one, not only adjusts the dampers, also adjusts the ride height to be able to do some of this stuff. Do you remember last summer we went to Chicago and we went into the Skunk Works for the UX design people inside of BMW? Well, here is the first real product that we're seeing in a complete deployment inside of a new vehicle, and that they changed the operating system for the BMW iDrive. This is the first indication of what's to come. This is operating system 7, and what they've done is they've moved the tiles, made them smaller, and one can go through, and then all of the main control application functions are over to the side, but then you can use things here with quick buttons to go between different applications. But as part of this, they've taken all of that BMW connected stuff we talked about in that previous episode. I'll link it up here so you can go check it out. But then one of the biggest changes, the key to the car is not just going to be the key itself, which I believe I have hidden here. Not this thing here. You can use your phone as the key to the car. However, there's one major caveat. Can't use an iPhone. You can't use most Android devices. You can only use a Samsung Galaxy 7 or above. But what's interesting when you do switch to a Samsung, which I wouldn't for this, you can set up 4 different phones. So if you have 3 other friends or your wife and the kids, each one of their phones can start the car. That, I have to admit, is incredibly cool. Let's just make it work with an Apple device. And I will say that, in fairness to BMW, this was not their issue. It's the typical Apple line of they don't allow access to the near-field communication within the newer iPhones. That's what's needed to get it to work, to open the door as well as start the car. So there you go, some tech. Now as we get into some testing for axle twist here, I will admit this is not rock crawling, and this thing wasn't designed to rock crawl before you get into your ridiculous comments. I will say this, this is getting tighter with the trees on the side, and that's where this whole camera thing comes into play. Although, for the avoidance of doubt, you want to be looking out there rather than looking at this. And why not, if you're doing that, go completely downhill, in this case 21-degree slope, 36% incline. And this is hill descent control, so keep in mind, for the avoidance of doubt, that is not my foot on the brake at all. This is me. Please don't try this at home. This has been blessed by an engineer from Munich who has let me take this car out on our own, not lead follow. And this is 100% of the car doing the braking and the gas on its own as we go downhill. Can't do that with an M4, can you? Okay, so we have another steep decline. Let's try something different. Let's turn the hill descent control off, and let's do the controlling of the speed ourselves. And this is interesting. It's a rut combined with a 15 degree angle. Yeah, we're confident enough to do this. We don't always need the computer to do it. I will tell you, coming through these ruts, whether it's up or down, the extra 40 mils of height on the air ride does make a huge difference getting through here. To set this up, to be able to get a very fancy baby buggy to do this, we had to do a little rocket scientist programming. So the first thing I had to do was go into Xrox mode. That basically tells the stability control system to turn off, and then it changes the setting on the suspension. So obviously we talked about the ride height, but then it also gives it more suspension travel for what we just did there, as well as some of the ruts we've been dealing with. I don't know if this were my vehicle, my 90 grand, remember this is a fancy one, so they're not all 90 grand, but I don't know if I would take my X5 out here. Think of this as an additional question. Would you actually go this kind of off-roading with an X5 or something that costs this much? Let me know in the comments below. So I would be remiss if I didn't share with you a bit of a disappointing experience in my time up in the hills of northern Georgia. You see, the fine folks at BMW USA were very kind to have me out there to drive one of their new X5s. And they didn't tell me whether it was going to be both the 6 and the 8, but they did promise we're going to get the 8 here in California. So that's all fine and good. And they did say there's going to be a plug-in hybrid coming up, which we're going to drive that too at some point. They did have one to show, but no one could drive it. What they didn't tell us was the fine folks at BMW AG were there with not one, but 3 diesels. An X30 xDrive D, an X40 xDrive D, and an X50 xDrive D. And I'm asking, well, why are all these different versions of diesels? So I sat down with a guy who runs all of the engines for the X5. Turns out the X30D is a single turbo, the X40D is 2 turbos, and wait for it, the X50D, 4 turbos. I begged, I pleaded, I cried like a schoolgirl to get behind the wheel of that X50D, and there was no way on God's green earth they were letting me or anybody else that had a residence in the fine old US of A driving that X50D. So something tells me I got to get my ass to Germany and drive that X50D. So good news, we got the Giraffe back from the XC40 episode. He is going to be driving for us while you and I do some practical things back here. First and foremost, this is where a 6-footer would be in the front passenger seat, leaving a lot of room back here, but not really a surprise when we talked about the wheelbase in the tech review. Now, while we're here, we do need to talk about some fancy bits, and there are some really fancy things back here. Yeah, there is a sunshade here and over on that side as well. Then there is the fancy wood like we saw in the tech review. It's like a grayish, stonish looking wood. And then, I don't think this is extended leather in this car, but the concept of having leather on top of the doors with a contrast stitch really helps back here. Sadly, this one is not fitted with the fancy Bowers & Wilkins system. This has got the Harman Kardon, so you don't have quite the jewelry on the speaker grills. HVAC controls back here as well as heated seats. Sadly, no cooled seats back here, though. There is a spacer button here, so maybe there is something like that on offer. And then, second time in a week, we're seeing a car that has USB-C in the back, not regular old USB. So you'd need to get a different connector, because this wouldn't work, to charge your phone back here. And there's a total of 3 in the car. So there's regular USB, so this one up front, as well as USB-C in the front. And then I am going to share the pièce de résistance with you. This thing here is optional. It's on both seats. And it's like Lincoln Logs for the back seat. You open this up, and then they have these little pieces that you can put in here. This is a connector you put in that you can put your shopping bags on, so it holds your shopping bags in place so it doesn't turn into like a Turkish bazaar back here. You can pull this out and get another one of these things that you can mount your iPad on, so you don't have to buy like the $5,000 TV system from BMW. You just buy this thing, and they didn't tell me the exact price, but I know in Europe it's something like 200 euros, so I can't believe it's that much more expensive in the US. And so you'd plug this in, put the iPad in, and you're all set. But then there's a really cool connector. Let's say you want the Willy Loman edition. You could hang your suit jacket back here with this very cool German plastic hanger. Upon reflection after this little jaunt to the backwoods of northern Georgia, I've come to the profound conclusion that my expectations of the Cayenne were indeed spot on, but my expectations of the X5 were understandably off. And that's because way back in the day when I first drove a Gen 1 X5, that was what, in 1999, I was not a practical human being. Well, that hasn't changed much. But I was a BMW owner, and at that it was an M car. So I was blown away that, forget about a car with a roundel, that any car that's tall like that could dynamically drive in that way. Now, the segment has evolved, others have come into it like Porsche, Mercedes has evolved from like a utility vehicle to something a bit more fun to drive. And what's happened now is Porsche has kind of mopped the floor with everybody's ass in this segment, at least from driving dynamics. But here, BMW has evolved into the 3rd generation X5, and that was, I would argue, more compliant, more softly sprung. It was trying to be the Big Ten, get more people. But now, in switching to Gen 4, the first thing that you sense within 5 minutes behind the wheel is not It's a honey of an engine. It's the dynamics, the way it drives, the smile it puts on your face. And the thing I couldn't help but thinking now, it is not subpar to the Porsche anymore. It is either on par with the base or even a mid-level Cayenne. That's how good the Gen 4 X5 is. And perhaps it does have something to do with the honey of an engine. With that, I am going to say that I need to turn this around to you guys, because now we have a much tougher choice. Prior to this, I would always say Cayenne because of what it can do on and off road. And here we took this $85,000 vehicle. I was wrong about 90 every time I referred to it in the episode. $85,000 on street tires that we drove from Midtown Atlanta all the way up to this farm. And then all we did was hit a button, raises the air suspension, and just drive cautiously and obviously avoid rock crawling. And it's kind of mind-boggling that these vehicles, both the Porsche and the BMW, can do it. And now the BMW has the on-road dynamics to match. So, tougher choice. If you were given 85,000 US or whatever that is in shekels or pounds or euros, which one would you choose? And you can only choose the Cayenne or the BMW, because the Mercedes is going to be changed. We haven't driven it yet. So which one would you choose? Why would you choose it? What region of the world do you hail from? And most importantly, what's the mission of the vehicle that you're using? Let me know in the comments below or via our social media, Motoman TV all in word, Motoman TV all in word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So with that, Kumo is adamant that I reacquaint myself with the Porsche, but not a Cayenne. So he has arranged that I go to a very, 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 very far away place. Did I say it's far away? That's gonna come next month. Until we see you next time, be Speka.